Welcome to Pennsylvania in Focus. I'm your guest host this week, Cole McNeely. Joining me, as she is on this podcast every week that she is on this podcast, because she has missed some, I will say. But nonetheless, she's here this week. It's Pennsylvania editor for the Center Square, Kristen Smith. I'm just going to get right into this because I love the lead of this story that you wrote about on the school funding debate happening in Pennsylvania. Quote, because I'm a good journalist, right? Quote, as the state's prolonged game of chicken enters its third month, all eyes turn toward the Pennsylvania House of Representatives. Man, there is drama happening in Pennsylvania over the school funding. Are we any closer to a resolution? Where are we at now?
No, we're not. As I said in the lead, we're in a game of chicken that just keeps going on and on. Each chamber, the Senate controlled by Republicans, the House controlled by Democrats, they just keep passing bills and then kind of daring each other to do something with it. And so that's what the Senate did a couple weeks ago. They came in and said, here are these bills that would authorize how to spend all the money in the budget. But guess what? We're not going to fund this program for schools that need the most money based on socioeconomic factors. We're not going to fund that, even though we were supposed to give an extra $100 million to it. And we're going to instead fund our school voucher program for $100 million that the governor vetoed behind our backs in cahoots with the House Democrats. So there's a lot of tit-for-tat happening. And that's not unusual in the legislature. It just seems especially pronounced this year. And even more so because this gamemanship is holding up the budget process in a way that really the only people who are paying for it is the taxpayers.
Yeah, so this seems like a situation where there's a lot of politics at play and the policies are going back and forth. And again, you mentioned Governor Shapiro pulling the school voucher program out of the budget and making that deal. I mean, and I'm going to ask you to speculate a little bit here, but I think it's important for the story. Do you think that's going to leave kind of a lasting stain just in terms of further negotiations that are going to happen between this administration and really the Democratic Party in Pennsylvania and the Republican Party? Do you think that goodwill is gone that Governor Shapiro kind of came in with? Because he came in really championing the idea of being a unifier. Is he still viewed that way? Does he still have any goodwill as it comes from his kind of political opposition in the Republican Party?
So from his political opposition, no. And in fact, I can't think of any elected official in Pennsylvania that has more spectacularly fumbled the ball on his unity message. I mean, literally the second that he got any heat for siding with Republicans on school vouchers to create and to remind our audience, he not only supported this program, but his administration helped write the bill. So they literally said, okay, we support it and this is how we're going to support it. And he was even on talking to media outlets a couple weeks ago saying, oh, I still think it's a great idea. I'm not going to, change my mind because my party would disown me, but I still think it's a great idea. So you can imagine how that sort of attitude he's at least being very clear cut and upfront about where his allegiances lie. But you can imagine from the Republicans' perspective, how do they trust him? They said that a couple months ago. How do we trust them moving forward? I mean, they literally did a handshake deal. There was so much back and forth. An agreement, the budget that they did pass initially had tons of money in it, all of Shapiro's priorities. The biggest single year increase in education funding in recent, I think, in history, really. And to give our readers perspective, the former Governor Wolf, who was in for 8 years, it took him his entire term to get even close to the couple $1 billion in spending that he wanted for education. They would have never given him $500 and some million for basic ed in any one of his years. Shapiro comes in and within months they have this deal. And then for him to turn around and say, I'm not going to do it. Never mind. My party won't agree to it. So you should have made a better deal. I mean, I don't know how you come back from that, really. And it is truly the genesis of this back and forth that you're seeing right now. And, there's a very funny, although appropriate description of how it works inside the Capitol. They call it Capitol High School because there's a lot of, I hesitate to say immaturity, but there is a lot of drama that unfolds and it doesn't feel like it's ever handled in a mature way. And I think that this is a prime example of those underhanded politics.
Well, and even Governor Shapiro himself, you wrote this in your story. He told the chambers to stop, quote, talking past each other and make a deal. And it's as an impartial bystander here, and I really am not coming in with this with anybody in the game here. Man, that is a heck of a statement to make after this being the fallout directly from his actions or lack thereof of kind of failing to be that unifying figure, and to say, well, stop talking past each other. I would imagine that rubs some people the wrong way. And you said it yourself, kind of this fall from the unifying grace that he's had. It just doesn't seem like this is going to get any better anytime soon. Am I wrong? Because even, let's set aside, independent of how you feel about policy X or Y, let's just talk about kind of the reality of the politics happening here. If he's going to try to reach across the aisle to make a deal, this is going to be tough to find some middle ground resolution on education after what's happened in the last year. Is that fair?
Yes, I mean, it's a very toxic way to handle this situation, and that's what our article tried to be fair about. And from the governor's actions, what I would say is that he completely washed his hands of this debacle, even though he played a very significant role in it unfolding. And he continues to stand back and say, fix this amongst yourselves. This is not my problem. You get me a bill to sign and I sign it. And that is a very interesting position for the executive branch to take, considering that they have, whereas the legislature, the Senate and the House have to come together, 253 minds, the governor, if he really wanted to, can be one mind and kill it all. So for him to pretend like he doesn't have any power over this, I think you could understand why Republicans are really reticent to trust him. I mean, if he's going to say, because he's kind of like a corrupt referee, technically he's saying he's in the middle, but at the end of the day, he's already proven that he will throw the game for Democrats when the time comes. So how could they ever trust him on anything? I think what you're going to see moving forward is this continued piecemeal solving of the situation. What we kind of, grazed over in the first part of the conversation here is that what the Senate did a couple weeks ago was advance two different bills, one that authorized spending for a bunch of programs that everybody agrees to, like increased ambulance reimbursement rates and funding for libraries and college or community colleges. So that stuff is not really a big deal. That stuff will eventually be passed, probably within the next couple of weeks, I would imagine, and that will be taken care of. And so I think eventually you're just going to winnow it down to this school funding debate, this ideological clash. And you're right, they all, at least for Republicans, Democrats, they don't want to be backstabbing. They want to be upfront and very on the offense about how they feel about these things. Our article tried really hard to explain where both are coming from, and it sort of underscores why this divide has gone on for so long.
Let's talk about that briefly. So again, I laid out, because I think it's just obvious looking at the situation, why Republicans would feel kind of jaded about this conversation. Mm-hmm. What is the Democrats' position or the administration's position? And I know there has been some division between the two on their messaging about education between kind of the party leaders in the House and the Senate versus what the governor has said. But broadly speaking, what are the Democrats saying about this entire situation?
So Democrats' long-held position has always been that, yes, our public school funding system is broken. And their position has been backed by a recent court ruling in the state that said our way of funding public schools is inequitable and it needs to be fixed. And so Democrats say the way that we need to fix this is to put all money into public education, more and more, and that will fix the problem. And there are even some Democrats who side with Republicans on this. More money has been given year after year and the problems still aren't fixed. So while they agree the system is inequitable, their feelings about how to fix it and make it more equitable are slightly different. Yes, more money for public schools, they say, but also school vouchers, which Democrats hate. They believe that they are an unconstitutional diversion of taxpayer dollars. But Republicans are saying, hey, let's take this money and, offer it to families in the lowest 15% of school districts, which means their test scores are in the bottom 15% of the state. Let's offer this to them and say, you can take this money and you can pay for tuition at a private school or some kind of charter school so that you no longer have to be stuck in these schools that are continuing to fail students. And you have to look at it from the perspective of a lot of these students live, they're unable to move out of these communities for many reasons, for financial reasons, for perhaps their family has been there for decades. So they are bound by their zip code to these schools. And Republicans and Shapiro are saying we can do both. Let's offer school vouchers and give more money to public schools. But Democrats just will not budge on this.
So that's kind of the policy opposition, right? So that's kind of where the policy headbutting is coming in. Have we heard from any Democratic leaders, anybody like that on, because I think associating teachers unions with Democratic Party is fair in this case. Their interests align here. Is there any comments about kind of the politics aspect of what's happening here? Because I get certainly the policy difference, but what about the politics aspect?
Certainly there is. So Rich Askey, who is the president of the Pennsylvania State Education Association, which is the teachers union in Pennsylvania, in a statement, he said that public schools are struggling to place teachers and aides in classrooms and hire bus drivers to take kids to school. We need to fund programs that address these problems. No Pennsylvanian can afford to let tuition voucher politics get in the way of doing that. So he's bringing up valid points. We have a ton of funding issues with schools. A bus driver shortage isn't just something that's happening in Pennsylvania. It's all over the country. And to think that we're sitting here tit for tat about these ideological issues instead of passing bills or giving money to these other very more urgent day-to-day concerns. That is a clear argument against what's happening here. I mean, to your point, though, and to the other side of the aisle, we have the Commonwealth Foundation, who are probably the most vocal supporters of school vouchers. They're saying, the Senate is trying to do something here. There's bipartisan support for vouchers and more school funding, public school funding, and that they just won't, they are so narrow-minded on how to fix the inequity problem that they won't consider that we can attack this from more than one angle. And so they're saying, if your overall point is that kids in public schools are being left behind because we're not giving them enough money, well, we're giving them more money. It's just not in the way that you would like.
Well, we remain at a standstill. There will certainly be more coverage of this at thecentersquare.com. Listeners, go check that out and go check out the great work of Kristen Smith. Really appreciate everybody tuning in. This is a very nuanced conversation that involves policies, politics that go back to even campaign season with the current governor. And so this is a big story that seems to just keep going and going and going. So stay up to date with that at thecentersquare.com. For Kristen Smith, I am Cole McNeely. Please subscribe and thank you so very much for listening.